Recording is now on. She used to say that, but I turned it off.
The ever-present Zoom big sister.
Yep. Her voice was annoying, so I was like, we're not doing that. You want to sync up?
Yeah. Let's do a check-in. You wanna go first?
Do you want to do like breaths together or like something like that helps us enter into like some type of space?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. I can really hear your background. I'm not sure if it's
What's happening in my background?
It's like no? Maybe it's me.
I don't think there's anything happening on my side that's making that noise. It's actually like very quiet over here.
I will take that then.
I mean, I can switch my speaker. Is that better? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Let me. Yeah, that's better. But now I can hear you speak.
Can you hear me speak now?
Yep. And it's better. Yep.
Okay. Cool. All right.
So I pulled a card, and this is an archetypal deck. So all the cards are of archetypes, and it's the Queen. Kind of
is that what's on top of the moon?
It's like a woman's hand or a hand holding a snake, and the snake is kind of holding like a jewel in its tail.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, that's Kim Cran's Wild Unknown Archetype. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a cool deck.
You can read it?
Yeah, do it.
The Queen, the Empress, the Mother Queen, the Sovereign. Like her counterpart, the King, the Queen has a dualistic nature. Either she presides over the realm of grace and eloquence that comes from the heavens to uplift the spirit of others, or she falls into petty, contemptuous moods, casting a shadow across the land. If the King is the ego, the Queen is the expression of that ego in the world. She is the lotus's blossom, the lotus's bloom, the dancer's bow, the moon's radiant reflection. When the Queen is seated in her rightful and righteous place, she is patient and forgiving. She waits for the grace of God and Goddess to move through her, striving and grasping for nothing. To be the benevolent leader, to embody the Queen, is to settle into deep trust, resolve, and power. The royal Queen fears nothing. her divinity itself cradles her heart. When light, the embodiment of grace, courage, resolve, stillness. When dark, vain, wrathful, self-righteous, and demanding. And it says, the queen does not accept the hand of a prince, but claims the throne, knowing the king draws near. She is a magnet for the fully embodied masculine and entertains nothing less.
So why do you think she showed up this morning?
She's actually already showed up. And then I tried to shuffle it and pick a new card, and then she came up again. So she's definitely present. It's actually kind of funny because on my other deck I have out here, we have the Prince of Swords and the Knight of Swords. And so the Prince, the Knight is the King of Swords in this deck. So you have like the archetypal feminine as the maybe like a context. And then we have the Prince and the King of Swords both present.
Yeah.
You know, for me, I kind of feel like I've been watching a lot of this kind of digital content and been in a few different spaces like these, and I think they're I think it's easy to feel the pressure. I feel it sometimes myself to have something very concise and clear that I want to accomplish, or I feel very sensitive or conscious about taking up time and space. And therefore, I feel like I need to be at the point right now. And that's probably helpful in some ways for content, with attention spans and all these kind of things. But I think there's actually a really beautiful aspect of allowing the time and space for what wants to come through to come through, and doing it in a way that trusts and surrenders into the intention that's set. We haven't gotten there yet. I'm not sure what the intention is, but I think there's some type of that. With the cards that are here, that relationship between the immature masculine and the mature masculine, the prince and the knight, as well as the larger container that's being held, which is the mother. It's this kind of divine empress feminine. So I kind of feel like as we're approaching, this time together, like to in some ways have that kind of structure and flow we normally have, right? Going to intentions, maybe taking a subject matter, having the context and exploring it, but having whatever we set as the intention, like kind of letting that relax and to surrender into what wants to come out here and being aware of how close or not we are to that. And also being aware, I think, of when the process may get challenging, but there's still that trust and surrender that's possible.
Yeah. Cool. I like it. Thanks, King and Queen.
Do you want any check-ins? Is there anything you want to dedicate or call in or?
No, I think that was pretty good. That was a good call in. Yeah. Do you want to check in first, or shall I?
You go first.
I go first. All right. I'm doing pretty well. I had an interesting week. Definitely riding the eclipse waves, and coming out of that was wild and super interesting. Last Sunday, so just under a week ago, I was over at my friend's house, and I was picking herbs in the garden, and he had a heart attack. And that was like pretty wild and super intense, and like not what I was expecting. And he's all right. He got a stent and is, back up and going. But yeah, it's just sort of like the energy was wild. kind of come in through that eclipse. And it felt different, like, because the one before was like, it was the full moon in Cancer eclipse. So it was like Cancer, this kind of like big, it felt very amplified. And then this one, since it was like moon in Capricorn, sun in Cancer, and and also like the solstice, it felt like kind of all these energies were sort of slightly muting, and like they weren't amplifying each other. And so at first I felt like they were kind of canceling each other out, but then it kind of like led to little explosions like that. Yeah. And apparently, like, I was talking with him and his girlfriend. Apparently, like 3 other people we know had like heart attacks like that weekend, which is like crazy. Like, we're all in our 30s. Like, what the fuck's happening? But so like early part of the week felt kind of turbulence there, and then kind of as we touched on, I think right before we started the recording, which apparently came up in my reading. I haven't watched it yet because I'm resisting. There's a process that I'm feeling needs to be moved into, and I'm resisting that. So doing some resistance, and but that's okay sometimes. That's my check-in. Overall, I'm good.
Yeah, I guess I'm checking in today. I feel really warm. It's really hot in Alabama, and so there's the humidity, and so I can really feel my body a lot more than normal. Like, I can feel my skin, I can feel the dampness or the weightiness of it, which is actually nice in a way because it reminds me of my body, but it's different. Um, I was in silence for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and it was a really good practice of my will. I think with the eclipse that's happening as an example, and so many planets in retrograde, I had some of the things that came up for me were like recognizing my external world was really reacting to my internal world, or recognizing some of my internal narratives that were pretty they were like safety mechanisms to protect myself through inaction, or safety mechanisms to protect myself through projection. And so to come into this relationship and kind of go inward to this silence, and to meet my pressures, or to meet my reactions in this way where it was a really I'd say beautiful practice, and I think it was actually more interesting to see how easy it was for people to accept it. I think the exceptions, it's not like I needed external validation, but it was like one of the internal stories was like, well, how are you going to go home and speak to your family? Or how are you going to be in a relationship? Or how are you going to keep working or doing events, all these things? And it was actually, very practical. And people were confused, but also accommodating, because I think where I came from inside myself, it wasn't like a choice. It wasn't like a question like, can you make me speak or not? It was like, I'm not speaking. So what are we going to do in this? And I think that was actually really, really important development, because that translates into like every other aspect of my life. So some of those questioning, or that approach to creation, or relating to my external environment through the practice, I mean, very, you know, um, something like silence. I'm watching how that's rippling out. Even this video right here, in a way, And some of the way I've been doing content creation the last few days is kind of that nest where it's like, well, okay, I hear the request, I see what is being asked for outside of myself. So then I come inside and I ask, what do I want to do from here? How do I want to be with this? How do I want to respond versus like react? Or how do I like, what am I trying to accomplish and how does this align to it? And so there's this sense of, in that card talks about the queen being sovereign. And I feel like there's this relationship to a relationship to sovereignty that's really come about across the moons. And as everything's kind of our eclipses and these retrogrades. And I feel like, Venus is in my Pisces is in Venus. And so that's also my sun sign. So there's like this, I feel that as Venus is going direct, I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I know that for me, it feels like the ability to take what was deep and inside and to start to really bring it outside again, right? But I've come into this relationship with myself in a new way. And now the strength and the capacity to confidently and securely relate to the outside world really feels present. And so this kind of feels like that, like a marker in that exploration. That's my check-in.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, quite the wild ride at the moment.
I'm kind of blown away by the heart attacks, but I don't want to approach the subject, but I just wanted to say like it's really fascinating. And maybe we can approach it, but maybe we set context, and if it comes up again, we talk about it. If that's cool.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's not something that I'm not open to discuss. I don't want to name names. This was a recorded Zoom call. But yeah, it's a trip, and it was quite the intense experience to witness.
When I thought about the context for today, I thought maybe some of it was going to aim towards your reading, and I guess in some way I know and you don't know yet, and so I won't.
Time.
I want to. I won't orient so directly at it, like I was actually intending to in a way, but I think I will orient toward, like if I was to set a context, it would be something around, you and I have known each other for a very long time, and we've been in, let's say, venture exploration, and a lot of just various ways in our lives, and I think there's been this continued question of like, what are we here to do together? And do we want to do it together? And what that look like? I think that maybe those are two pointed questions, but I think what I would like to maybe set as context is like, not necessarily having to go into like an origin story, but maybe it's like in a way like presencing what's really alive for us right now in our lives, and listening in to see, I think, even just what this dedicated space could be. So for context, we're talking about doing this every Saturday. So once a week, kind of meeting up and having it be recorded. This has no name. This has no clear purpose yet. And so part of the question I would have here is like, what can this space be? And how can it be relevant, timely, and be potent for what's going on in our lives individually, but also with a recognition this has a collective space. It's really a big context, but I hope maybe there's a more defined context you can shape or you heard in that, if that feels good for you as a direction.
Well, I mean, I think, big contexts aren't necessarily bad, particularly in that it sounds like you have a pretty good idea of how to navigate that big context. So, yeah, maybe not.
I feel skilled enough to find my way through it, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think there's an interesting piece of context that you brought up in there, and like, do we want to try to pin or nail this thing down a little bit more? And it's been interesting in that, like, it actually seems like we do better in the undefined expansive spaces. Like when we try to kind of pin this down and be like, oh, we're doing this in this context for this or whatever, then shit just breaks. So yeah, I mean, I think your context sounded good, and I think we can provide a little bit more, intentionality and container to this thing, and at the same time, I'm totally fine leaving it pretty open.
If you were to say the context, could you just say it again? Like what you heard?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said, I mean, there were some pieces kind of about like the reading and stuff like that you were going to kind of secretly couch in and weave into it. So I don't know what that looks like, but it sounded like, okay, we're here, we've committed to, gathering on Saturday mornings to do a recorded Zoom call to discuss some things, and it doesn't really have any more purpose than that. We've been in relationship for a while and in various venture and non-venture and co-exploration and exploration and all of these things for, years now. And yeah, so just exploring kind of what the container we set up is. That's sort of what you said?
Mm-hmm. So where do we start?
Well, I mean, I guess, my original question, which we can start there or not, is like, to what extent do we want to define this space? Do we want it to allow it to just be more expansive and ephemeral, and maybe it will take more form as we move through it? Or are there certain parameters and guidelines, right? We started off the call with that reading of, well, there's the queen, which she's holding the divine feminine. So she's moving in the space, right? And then the king. So we've got some structures and boundaries. Okay, we're going to gather on Zoom at this particular time on this particular day. Is that enough of a boundary? And then there was also like the kind of the less mature moving into maturity masculine. So it's like, do we hold that, or is it do we need to bring any more definition for that divine feminine to thrive?
Yeah, my sense is like, when I heard the queen, it was like, I'm not, let's say we're in our princeness, and let's say we have our intention to get into our knightness, our kingness, and the queen that's here and present as the archetype is just waiting for that to happen. And she's not passively waiting, right? She's like in her power and like doing her thing and living her best life. And she's just like, okay, well, I'll come, or I'm present, right? But I'm waiting and watching to see what happens here, right? Do you mature? Or what does maturing look like? I think there's nothing wrong with being a prince. Just when people knew that, right? It's still the risk taking and the ability to be in an adventure and the knowledge and security that comes with like knowing where you're going without having to have all the pressures of running a kingdom yet. I think is actually a gift in its own way. And because both are present. I think that even speaks out a little bit more. There's a little bit more security, and so yeah, I think you mentioned something that I thought was interesting, which was like almost like what is the criteria, uh, the design criteria of the space. So what things do we know work for us, or what things do we want to call in or bring forward that maybe we want to start to build the space around. So maybe it's like a way of like really branding it and putting an intention around it and having a description, having it very clear. There's also a little bit of like a, taking the time and space to figure out, well, what is something that we know works for us, and how do we want to integrate that or call it into what we have going on here?
Yeah, that's the question.
I had to come to it on my own, It's like,
yeah. No, I mean, that was beautifully stated. Do you have any thoughts?
I think one of the concepts I've been playing with, and I think we both have as active parts of our lives, but I've also noticed that we talked about this in the past, maybe how it can easily be lost in the venturing or the work aspect, but of our relationship to spiritual or sacredness. We can even go as far as say our relationship to shamanic practices. And I think in our individual lives, we both have a very deep and profound relationship and practice around that. And I think, from our phone calls to our, the work we do, it's often a question or wondering about how do we integrate this, or is there even room to integrate this in? And so there's been some like, it's easy for myself to repress that or to drop it back or try to figure out how I can cover over or to hide it so that we can ease it in or like make it work. And I'd actually raise up and say, well, what if the space, like what if we really intended this space to not to even like reactively like look at all the things that are shamanic, but like to find that healthy relationship to our shamanic and our spiritual practices being almost a principle or an intention and make that apparent in our in the space.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like I was sort of touching on this yesterday, right, with the combo with Jeremy, where it was like, he felt like the work we'd been doing together had like started this, hero's journey for him, right? And he didn't use the word hero's journey, but he basically described that, right? He's like, I started out and I went through the fire and I got my skills and I came back and now I'm in this new space. And so, he was describing the hero's journey. He was describing how he felt that like the work with me was like an integral part of that. And I was like, I was reflecting on that. I was like, okay, what the fuck did I do? Because like every process I kind of tried to do with him, like broke or fizzled or like didn't really do it. But it was just like, it was continually coming back and continually holding space just to be in that. So it's not so much, I don't know, I don't feel that it's so much repression, right? It's just not like active, active, really having it front and center, being forward, because it's not like a piece of ourselves that like we can, or at least for me, or really like try to hide. It's just kind of part of our presence, and so there is just like us being there and present. So like in this, like we're here together, present. There's inherently going to be a strong quality of shamanism and magic and spirituality because that's who we are. And it's like, and so it's more a question of like, do we want to amplify it and give it structure?
The last note, I really thought about just, I think even naming it is structure in its own way. It actually kind of gives it like a form and it gives it a presence. I think that's really um, like claiming it is a big step. And as I was listening to it, what came up for me was thinking about um, a few years back, maybe like a year or two ago, when I was working with Internalize, we were talking about the shape or form of our ethos, right? Um, and we're talking about how like the difference between like a sprint and a journey. And the journey being like how long you walk with someone as an example, or we're talking about how someone that is like a journeyman or even a shaman can choose um, how they interact with those that come to them. And so some people you mentioned are like, I'm here, you can see me 4 times a year. You come in, you have 30 minutes, and then you're on your way and check back in after that, and I'll tell you what's up, right? I don't need to be with you all these moments. And there's also some other, like with Internalize, that I would be there every single day. Just think that was like a little bit of overkill because they were I was so integrated that it kind of threw off their natural frequency or vibe. Um, so what I noticed about what you were saying with Jeremy was like that there's actually a journeyman to you as well. Like the organizations you're actually with for a pretty committed relationship. And although there wasn't always something particular to point to, the act of walking with them is because of what I heard was like your nature or our natures, the nature of our natures, uh, actually brought that shamanic, magical aspect into the venture itself, and I think into the life of the founders that we are walking with.
Yeah.
It feels very. It feels very potent, and I think what I'm feeling in my chest a little bit, like in my heart, is like I feel the pressure sometimes to have to get to an end result and like get to it as fast as possible in order to replicate it. And to figure out what it is very quickly. Like, what is it? How do I define it? How can I get it out to market? How can I get people to be interested in it? Like, it's like this business pressure that comes with it. And there's also a need to like productize or servitize, turn it into a product or service. And because what I was feeling as I was speaking, I'm kind of losing it right now, so I want to kind of get back to it, is like the in some ways the thing that is of value is slow and ephemeral, and it's actually a presence. It's it's the way that we show up, um, and the way in the commitment to be with something for an extended period of time, that is uh, has this developmental value in and of itself. Um, and I don't want to take away from like the finite tasks or strategies or services that are offered in the gap time, right? Because all those things I think are also the content or the moment. They create the moments where that work is actually happening, right? They're kind of like part of the alchemy. They're challenging, they're creative, they're blending things together. As for for you, maybe finance as a structure for a shamanic practice. I'm not that sure or not, but like I know it's a really challenging place for a lot of people to be in relationship to their finances. And I imagine there's a lot of developmental work that happens there, and there's a lot of space holding through a very concrete set of skills and uh, practices in which you're able to work with and help them grow. Does that feel true?
Yeah, I mean that's something that I've been reflecting on and kind of speaking to lately is like so I mean the structure for Jeremy, it was like for like a year and a half we just got together once a week and we like talked about finances, right? And so that was the content and the context, and there was something deeper happening there just by being in the process and doing that practice and walking with him. on that journey. And there is something about finances, because like it's so shadowy for almost everyone, that like engaging that seems to unlock something subtle and work that process. So I don't really know what happened. And like, at the same time too, it's like part of me is like, well, you don't totally have to understand it. And then another part is like, well, if I want to, shift into more doing this, like actually doing that, right? Like taking people through the hero's journey and walking with them. It's like there is a level of understanding and articulation so that it can be replicated and maybe done in a shorter time. There's an element of like, you got to let the tea steep. But I also feel like there are people who are more ready to go on a more accelerated path than just the subtle transformation. So I don't know. That's what I'm exploring, right? It's that same question to like, to what extent does this thing need to take structure and form and articulation? And it's like, it's kind of similar with like this is the process we've been working for like 3 years now, right? It's like, how do you go from like the ethos like into the form? And like we always try to we just kind of take it and we like kind of slam it. We try to make a form, and we've struggled there. We've struggled there for sure. So that piece is challenging for us. And I think part of that is maybe our nature, and part of that too is like the space we're working in, right? It's not like, oh, well, we're trying to build a new pair of shoes. So it's like, here's the design factors, and then let's get some like leather and some rubber and sew it together, right? We're trying to build something very next paradigm, right? Everything we're trying to do, we're trying to build stuff that it's like, we see, well, this is how the world's going to be operating in 50 or 100 years. But how do we build it now? And put it in terms and ways that people can understand now.
So I'm aware that we're using a lot of language like ethos and form that may not have context here. I'm also aware that
someone like watching the recording.
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think we understand, but I just was, there's no action that has to happen there, I don't think right now, but I was just noticing, I left my body or something like that and was like looking at it. I was like, oh, if someone was watching it, they would maybe have a question there. And I began to strategize what I would do about that, but that's not really, that's not really here or now. I also, I noticed like a lot of references, like our work ahead or our work in the past, and so there's a really interesting. Yeah, I'm watching the referentials, and I'm noticing the invisible shared context, and wondering about, okay, well, what needs to be made visible, even for ourselves in this space, and still holding that, I think, intention, that question around shamanism, magic, and its presence in this shared space, in this shared social space. And what I kind of maybe what I'm coming to is like, I think we both are in agreement that no matter what, that will be present because of who we are and because of who we are together. If anything, it'll amplify itself. And there's actually a potential question around, well, what does that look like, to, if it is amplified and we want to make it more visible, what would that look like? So that's something that I kind of heard as like a potential inquiry or something to look at. The other thing I heard was like in looking at our works in the world, there are different types of journeys that we can go on. So certain people may be on a more accelerated path. Some people may be a multi-year walk along, you know, and that's not quite for here. I don't know, but I imagine the thing that I see is that again, when I zoom out and look at what's happening, it's like, well, this something that may also be a criteria that's possible for this kind of designing this space is recognizing those archetypes or personas, or even making commitment to the kind of journey that we're on together, right? So I think on the Zoom meeting, like very like swords kind of way, I said I put 5 meetings for every Saturday, for the next five weeks. And so there's that was kind of my cautious commitment. It's okay. Let's just have a clear window. We can always extend from there, but at least for the next 5 weeks, we can agree to meet once a week and have these conversations. But I do think it's interesting to think about, if this is a walk along journey, right? If we're going to walk together, I mean, we have been walking together for years, and there's a commitment to that, right? To continue to walk together in this type of form. I think that really looks at that relationship to King of Swords, Prince of Swords, Queen energy, because the container is committed to a container for a very long container. And so I don't know if it does like pressure of creation or even just recognition of the creation that's happening here in this context of conversation and dialogue, right? But I just so I have timelines up from here now. I have context for people who are watching, so or even for ourselves to work through, to wonder if that clarity is actually of value for us to carry through in the space. And I have that a presencing again of like our own interpretation and our own showcasing our relationship to a shamanism in digital spaces, or in social spaces like this one. And the awareness or the intentionality around its presence, being satiated by naming it, and also being open to greater and larger context or expressions of it in our work together.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, so you named a lot there. Is that one of those things you wanted to start with?
I was also aware that I was naming a lot of things, which is good awareness.
You cut out just slightly. What'd you say?
I said I was aware that I was like, oh, I'm saying a lot of things right now, um, which I think is helpful because I noticed a tendency to do that. And I imagine also that's maybe challenging for, is that challenging for you to follow? Or is it challenging for you to work with in conversation?
No, not necessarily. No, I think it's good to, get it all out there, and then, if there's something that particularly resonates for me, we can address it. And if there's something that, you're particularly inspired by as you say it, we can just run with that. I think there are a couple little small things in there, like 5 weeks. Like, sure, let's do it.
Cool.
Let's commit to five meetings right now. Yeah, and I mean, I think the context question is really interesting, right? Like, because there is a high degree of familiarity that we have, and we also tend to talk in a relatively terminologically sophisticated way, right? Like we take terms and we assign them meaning, and then we continue to deepen and understand that meaning, and then we throw those terms around casually. So, like, I find myself talking about our conversations with people, and I'll throw out a word and they'll be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, what is form? Why do you keep saying form? And it's like, I'm like, oh, right. Like, you don't just understand that because we haven't been talking about that for 4 years now. So I do think, if we want to make these accessible, we do need to do some terminology definitions. And at the same time, like, I don't know the best way to do that. Particularly being that they're so contextually based. Like I could sit and give a definition of ethos and form right now, and it would be all right. But like a lot of our conversation has to do around like the shared meaning that we built over 4 years of deepening into an understanding of these terms across many, many, many conversations. And so that's not something that can be easily communicated.
Yeah, what kind of comes up is like, it feels like, again, like a design criteria for the space, which is like, what I would propose is that this space is actually for us. And anyone, people come to it or invite people in to be part of the conversation. If this grows, then that's beautiful. But this is dedicated to those that are literally present on the screens. Although we are holding that awareness that, across time, and in a timeless way, people are already present and walking with us. And I also see opportunity. So if that's like a design criteria for the space right here, there's an opportunity, I think, to create smaller segments of content that actually approach some of the more like contemplating some of the concepts that we have. So we can contemplate ethos, we can contemplate form, and that can be, short form or discrete content that we offer or that we put forward. And allow this to be more of that running, walking together, present space that is the journey in and of itself. That's not true, but is meant to it doesn't need to try to catch people up to where we have been, although that may be relevant sometimes for us to do ourselves. But it is for us to continue to press forward in whatever way is necessary. I think I already said that, but I was trying to reframe it, but didn't really come through in a way that was more clear. So I think probably I've already said it clearly enough.
Yeah. Can I wrap on a definition for a second and
yeah.
see if it's any good? I was just, as you were talking, I just sort of started like, okay, if I was going to throw out a little mini context session, what would I say? And I feel like it's like best understood in the form of the medicine wheel as the whole process that we've been talking about. So we do use these terms in isolation, but they're part of the whole. And I think to understand them, the whole actually needs to be understood. And basically what we're describing is, I think we're actually describing a common evolutionary process and just putting our own spin on it. And basically, we've been talking about archetypes a lot, and as it's coming and flowing, it seems like we've been using the word archetype since the start, and I don't think that's a coincidence. So I think it really is an archetypal process and a deepening of understanding which archetype and archetypes you're embodying, right? And so the process begins in the East, like with the medicine wheel, and goes around, and it's at first an understanding of what archetype are you trying to embody in the world, right? Like, what are you trying to be? What are you trying to show up as, right? And there's going to be layers of dirt clouding understanding. So, who you want to be based on your programming, based on your, experiences, based on your wounds, like all of that is going to shape how you show up. But it's like how, like at a certain point, at a certain point, what is the clearest that you can get about stating who and how you want to show up in the world, right? And so for like me at this point, like I'm about my ethos is about unlocking possibilities, right? So serving as an example, walking a path which unlocks opportunities and allows people to step into their truest self, into a deeper expression of their ethos. So it's like that's my current understanding of like who I really want to be in the world. And this ethos can apply to a business, can apply to a person, but it's like it's the best ability that you can understand of who and how you want to show up in the world. And then that moves into the South, moves into the form, right? So then it's this exploration of like, okay, so if that's who and what you want to be, the archetype that you're embodying, your understanding of that archetype, then how does that show up in the world? And what form does that show up in? Be that, what do you do for work, or like, what does the business make? What does the business do? What are the business processes, the culture, all of these like tangible, like 3D things that stem from this archetype. And when we were looking at that, we looked at the Platonic forms, right? We've talked about the Platonic forms, which if you're not familiar with, you can Wikipedia or, there's a lot of resources on those. But the idea is basically that there are these archetypes, and then they allow percolation down into the physical world based on, the contextual understanding, right? So there is an archetypal form of currency, right? And then the tangible form depends on the cultural and physical contexts, right? So like back in the day, it was like currency was like barter, or like we'd gather up some shells and we would trade some shells, and that slowly evolved, and like now we have like Bitcoin, right? And kind of these more advanced, and so currency is advancing and changing with the time, but it's still all based on this archetypal form of currency, which is basically something that can be exchanged for value, right? Holds value and can be exchanged. And so after you take that form and you build that, then you work that, right? So you take this thing you created in the world and you work it, and then you move into the West, into the shadow piece. And so then exploring, okay, well, I have this form, I'm doing these things, and in what ways is it not working? In what ways are my hidden wounds, are my inability to own certain parts of this archetype, whatever, all the things that you're doing that are causing you to come up short from where you want to be. So you dive into and explore that, right? And hopefully try to heal those wounds, right? To the extent that you're able. And, we've spent a lot of time working the first two, so we're a little less familiar with the second two, but that's part of the process. And then you move into the North, what we call the evolution, right? And so that's this expansiveness. So looking at where you can take this thing, where you can grow it, looking at resources, looking at guides, looking at partnerships. What are the ways that this archetype and this healing of the wounds allows you to expand in the world, connect with others, connect with, it's like the North is traditionally ancestors, guides, all of these pieces. So it's like looking at how you connect with the larger macro world, and really bring this service, and how that informs how you want to shift and develop that engagement and that back and forth. And so then this process, what it does is that then it takes you back into the East, because it's a circle. And so all archetypes are a scale, right? So it's like there is an archetype, and depending on your understanding and your ability to engage it, you can show up. The archetype will show up in your life somewhere on this scale, from like totally unconscious to very, very conscious. So it's like, if you look at, like, so basically, like, say, like the rapist and like Don Juan, like ladies' man, are actually like the same archetype, but they're just unconscious and more conscious. I'm not sure Don Juan is the fully conscious vision of that archetype, but they're actually the same archetype, and so it's somewhere on the scale. And so as you go through this process, then you can come back to a deeper understanding of your ethos, a deeper understanding of the archetype that you're trying to embody and bring to the world, and you can take it into the next level of consciousness, a deeper level of understanding, and run the process again.
Yeah, I think that was really like, it was in my mind, I was able to track the visual picture and also the journey. I think both because of my experience with it physically, right? Like actually working through those processes together and understanding the terms, but also I think the medicine wheel is a great tool or a map of the territory that is there. As I was thinking about the West, I wanted to maybe call in like a different perspective or characteristic that came up. I felt really the East as kind of like the let's say the ethos, archetypal ethos. So there's an ethos is being stated, which is kind of archetype in itself, but it's kind of formless. It's less concrete, and it moves into like a level of form as it becomes more of a discrete archetypal form that is maybe more material. Doesn't have to be maybe, but I think that's what I kind of heard was this a more material form. And then the West is kind of you mentioned as a shadow, and I think when I was listening to the word shadow and thinking about, I saw a lot of images of forms, and what I thought about it was like, in Gene Keys, this idea that like every person, this is probably just across the board thought, but like I really get it from the Gene Keys, like as you come into relationship with your physical body, you recognize that everyone has a core wound. Like part of being human is having core wound. And so part of like incarnating into form is having a core wound. And so the core wound could be seen as the shadow, which is, I mean, it is a shadow, right? But it's also this like, it's a thing that you're here to heal. And it's the thing that you distinctly and uniquely, although there's like archetypes to even that core wound, it's the thing that you're uniquely, your purpose or your reason for even incarnating into form. So while your ethos speaks to like this ephemeral essence that may also have an archetype to it, and then the form is like an embodied or material manifestation of the ethos. By coming into form, the ethos now is in some way not fully embodied. Some part of it had to leave behind, as an example, just as a part of it. Or there's some pain.
Wounded by coming into form.
That's what happens. Yeah. So in the West, we now have this recognition of the wound, but also I think there's this opportunity to recognize it as the purpose in a new and discreet way.
Yeah.
And then there's, that, and there's the movement to the north is like, okay, so it's like, I have this, I know I want to incarnate onto the earth. What am I? Okay, I'm entering it. I take the material form that I think will best work. I think about like the idea that when you're a human being and you're choosing to come as a human body, you pick your family, you pick your country, you pick all the things that are going to be right for you to learn all the right lessons in order to show up and live your purpose. And so this, in some way, the ethos experience is something very similar to that, which is like, how much can we map out? Knowing there's like this emergent nature to coming into reality in some way. But you bring into form. That form then has a core wound, and then it's like addressing and being with that core wound, recognizing what it is, and actually converting it or understanding it as the purpose of incarnation from a new perspective, which is that of the material realm. And then taking that sense of higher self, taking a recognition, understanding of what you are in form, taking that sense of purpose that comes with the recognition, owning this responsibility of the wound that we are here to heal, and bringing that out into the world.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I love that, and I love the way you spoke to it. I mean, I could have spoken to that a lot more, and I wish I had. And I think the piece you slightly glazed over too is like it's this process of like it's recognizing that like yes, this is the wound, the unique wound that you came to heal, and like that's where the source of the power of the archetype actually is, right? So if we look at like the example I used earlier, like the total like savant like lover archetype versus like kind of the creepy rapist, it's like the wound there is actually like being like rejected or unloved, and like how that has warped like the passion, right? And so the power that person has, it's like it's still their passion and like their love, and it's just been wounded. So it's like it's unraveling that and unlocking it so that it becomes pure love and becomes this really, really beautiful, powerful piece.
Yeah, I think what comes up, like what's happening in my head is I'm like, this is good. Um, and I think it's distinct as well because it's like there was a part of what I proposed, I think, before we went into this was like that this space was space for us. And maybe it didn't have to be definitions. And I think you were like, well, I think in this moment I feel called to actually go into definition exploration. And I'm recognizing that even in this larger context, the smaller content is actually created. This is like a bite or a bit. I mean, a very big bite, but like a bite or a bit within within a larger stream. It's me eating a whole bag of plantain chips. It's like, it can be as satisfying or not there, but it's like, I'm recognizing that, and that's just where my brain was operating from it. And I also wanted to look at the importance or the potential importance of speaking through spectrum. So, you brought that I glaze over the spectrum in some way, like the importance of the archetypal spectrum. And what kind of came up as like a reminder, oftentimes people will interpret what I'm saying in an absolute way. Like I'm speaking from a place of absolutism, and that's not really how I am at all.
Yeah.
I just throw it now, like that's not how I am at all. Makes it sound like
I'm never like that.
And so I think an awareness around the value, the potential of the value of speaking to spectrum as a potential as a part of this kind of design criteria practice, because that I can imagine how that range of motion or that fluidity can really open up topics and discussions for our own exploration, and also for anyone else that's a part of this kind of collective wisdom, collective intelligence community, right? This social field of learning that they can really come into their own relationship, but also be able to have their own absolutist, which I imagine may also be like an archetype in some way, come into relationship with that, to what's being said here. So not being anything so bogged down and having to have everything operate on a spectrum all the time, but inviting in that awareness and the sensitivity to the spectrum and what is being discussed here.
I mean, I like everything you said. I don't totally understand what that means practically. I guess I don't totally understand what you mean by like speaking to a spectrum. Like I know I just did it, but I don't totally know what you mean by that.
What I think I was just trying to do it. So part of what I noticed myself doing was being conscious of my language. So including things, it kind of feel like I'm stepping off of what I'm trying to declare, but it is possibility as an example. I think creates a little bit of space, or bringing in the polarity of a subject matter and seeing what that offers to the discussion itself. People call it like devil's advocate, but I think that is um, that term may not be as viable or useful here. But the concept of it or what it's representing may actually be very useful here. To bring in the opposite of the polar, creating a binary in conversation in order to explore the space in between and how they are in relationship to have a deeper or more meaningful, or at least more dynamic understanding of these, whether that be the ethos or the forms or the wounds or the we don't have a word for the evolution, right? As archetypes in and of themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. I like that. And I mean, just to name, we're literally holding this in a container of polarity, and like polarity keeps coming up in our readings, like the king and the queen, right? Like masculine, feminine. Like that's like the most primordial archetypal polarity that it gets, right? Like maybe light and dark, but it's like it's possible that that's really that as well. So so we're holding this in a container of polarity. And I mean, even like the reading we did like a month or so ago, right? It was like the prince and the princess, right? So there's like I think polarity seems to be very suggested. Yeah. Is the prince and the princess of discs. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I like polarity, right? I like exploring those extremes.
That's fascinating. I shuffled the deck, and somehow the Prince of Discs still ended on the bottom, but the top card shifted, which is quite fascinating. How those things happen sometimes.
Dude, tarot decks are weird.
I know.
There's some wild magic in there.
So, we don't have to end, but I do feel like at a point of somewhat completion. Right? Like I feel like there's been like the journey feels like it's got like a transition point. So I know that in We Are Open Circle, as an example, we do that kind of witnessing around. Sometimes our checkout serve as that, but sometimes it's actually meaningful to have a way to reflect on what we understood happened here. I think it's good for us. I think also anyone that's watching it can have that kind of, if this is a lot of information to take in, which I imagine it will be, or to play with the process, this could also be really helpful. I think there's value in surfacing what is still alive for us or what we are walking away with from here, as a practice.
Yeah. So that's what we're stepping into.
Does that feel good?
Yeah. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that came up for me as far as what I witnessed, and we did not explicitly name, which I'd like to explicitly name in this witnessing round, is, we were sort of like, well, what are we doing? And then we just started talking, and it's like, we're talking like, well, like, we're just inherently like exploring magic and self-development in business. Like, that's kind of what we do. Like that's what we are. Like, we're exploring this shamanism, this magic, this journey walk, and what it looks like, and like its permutations, and like just by virtue of us showing up and talking with someone, like that process is happening. So it's like, okay, like that seems to be what the overarching context of these calls is going to be, is like an exploration of magic and shamanism in business. And that's my witness.
I witnessed an ease. Talk about this often, but there's an ease in conversation and communication with us from years of practice, I think, and from a orientation to a similar higher ideal. And I find that coming up here in this conversation, just we're pointing at something, we both know what it is, even though we don't even name it in the majority of the time. We don't even have a name for it all the time. But we feel it, we know it, and we're aligned to it. And then we're operating at different levels with that. So I really saw that here. When I think about what this space is, I agree with the magic and the shamanism in business. And I think, I made a comparison the other day, like there's this, actually, is this witnessing? I don't know if it is or not, but I'm going to go about it anyway. There's a sense of like meta nature to what's happening here. So this is a form in and of itself, right? This is a concrete, like there's going to be a video that comes after this. This video will go online, and it can actually be multiple forms that come from this. And this form is also the space that we're in, right? And there is an ethos, even though it's not definitely clearly named. It also has its own compartment. So you said magic and shamanism in a business around in business, right? That's kind of an ethos. It's not the most elegant yet, and it is, I think, true. There's this is like a social shamanic practice of starting up. Social in the sense that we're not working in isolation, we're actually working together. And then social in the point of where there's an intention of transparency in this process. Um, and an inviting in of, asynchronous commentary and social relationship around these conversations. I noticed some design criteria around that, holding that shamanism and that magic up, and allowing it to come into whatever forms feels true, and being conscious of its natural presence and also an openness to its amplification with intentionality. I noticed a dedication to this space being for those that are present, but allowing our awareness to expand beyond just this screen, and open up to a larger context. And so we're able to go where we want to go together without feeling that like expectation or corruption by the need to do something for another person. But also in that awareness, being able to make choices that may actually expand our understanding of even what we're doing together as it comes up. I noticed we have a relationship to a tool set as well that I thought came up as kind of a design criteria, which is like a non-linear but also linear circular progression of creation in a way, from ethos to form to shadow to evolution. Or something like that, right? The movement from the east to the south to the west to the north, and also recognizing that's repetitive. You tell me to shorten up.
No, I was saying we're also still on the lower end of the spectrum of understanding what that process fully
Yes.
is.
And that's
4 years in, we've gone from.
But everyone else is like a finger, so we at least have a little bit of space between our two fingers right now.
Sorry.
And I think I'll add that piece of criterion as well, which is like a recognition that this is a multi-year, adventure together. From looking at before this recording has happened, and also I think there's an orientation or understanding there's a long way to go, and I think there's the potential for commitment to really continue out in that direction, while also having finite or time-bound landmarks, like a 5-week, this being at least a 5-week series that we have already committed to here, 5 weeks, and seeing where we end up. And so, in all these things, I want to also presence the maybe this is the last, but like our relationship to speaking to spectrums or speaking in spectrums, because all these criteria actually operate on a spectrum. So the shamanism is like held up, or the magic of shamanism is held up. But then it's like, okay, well, what does that look like? Visible, invisible. Just by naming it to like going into full ceremony and having that be present, or something like that, or beyond. The time. There's the timelessness of the work, right? Or something like that. And there's also the time-bound 5-week, or saying we're going to do it for an hour call, whatever these things are, right? There's the awareness of audience, so the greater collective, but there's also the spectrum of how we want to relate to that. It's like we can just talk Justin Peter check-in. We can also expand and contract to let and go into exploration that we know is meant for larger and larger context or audiences. So I want to bring that kind of distinguish as well, as it says speaking in, I think, and through spectrum, as being inherent and present. So that's kind of my witnessing.
Yeah, I mean the piece that I love about spectrum, just to like close out, quick respond to that, is just it's a recognition that everything's a process, right? And it's not like you never get to the end of the spectrum, right? It's like I had, a client that I was working with doing some shamanic work with, and, she was asking something along the lines of like, how fast will I be healed, sort of thing. I was like, well, like that's not the question. Like it's, it's the onion, right? It's the spiral. It's the like, you work it and you come around and you're like, oh, here's the deeper manifestation of it. And you go around again and you peel the onion, you go around the spiral, you move the spectrum. It's a process, right? And so like, I don't think, recognizing that just recognizes that like it's all, you're always in process, and you're always in work, and you're always moving. And the movement is really important, right? And recognizing that, because too, if you're like only looking at the end goal, then you don't recognize the progress you've made. And it's like, yeah, we've moved from here to here, and that's beautiful. Like that's amazing. Like we now have a much deeper understanding, and there's infinitely further to go, right? Lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes. And I honestly find that really beautiful. I find that really beautiful and uplifting, because it's not a binary. It's not right or wrong. You're done or you're not. It's like you're always in process and always in flow, and continually, uncovering what the more realized aspect of yourself, of the archetype of the process is.
You want to do a checkout and close?
Yeah.
Cool.
I'll let you go first.
Okay. So I have this other deck. of course. And it's called the Sacred Rebel.
I've drawn from that deck just like once, but I remember it being really cool.
Elena Fairchild is she makes great decks. Congrats her, and I'm really loving it.
So when I imagine Justin traveling around, I see him with his backpack that's like 80% tarot decks and then like a pair of shorts and a t-shirt and a sweatshirt.
I have my laptop, I have my gimbal, I have 5 tarot decks, and maybe like a bag of gems and stones, and then some clothes. Yeah. That's pretty much it. All right, I'm gonna read it. So the card that comes up, which I think is really beautiful, is the word that wants to be written.
Ooh. Okay. I like it.
You might have been taught that creativity is something you have to work hard to access, or that finding your life purpose is so difficult you must search high or low for it. Yet what you are is within you and wants to come out at every available opportunity. You don't have to struggle so much. It is more about allowing space for it to manifest and to let the energy flow. The real struggle is not in finding something, it is more about letting go of the idea that you need to search for your path in the first place. You see, the process of activating your life path is a natural one. The effort is in getting out of the way, not in making something happen. As for being yourself, that is the foundation from which your true life path will reveal itself. Being yourself becomes easier when you give yourself permission to love, honor, and accept yourself in all circumstances, especially the ones where you might be more tempted to reject and judge. Give the sacred rebel in the opportunity to decide your values, irrespective of whether you meet with general social acceptance. This oracle brings you the message that what you are dreaming of or seeking to do, create, live, or manifest is actually very natural for you. That is why you want to do it. If you experienced controlling and manipulative forces as you were growing up, you would have found it hard to access your natural state at the time. You would have been too busy trying to adapt and get through the trials of childhood. When you finished navigating childhood and started to let go of who you were taught to be in order to become who you really are, you may have found your life path was not easily accessible. That is simply because your true and natural self was covered by layers of shame from the early conditioning that you had to be other than you are in order to win love or be acceptable. However, that natural self has not gone anywhere. It is still there within you. Now it is just about chipping away at the walls of shame, perhaps with a defiant, who the hell cares? I am here and I am going to love myself anyway. This allows you to risk bearing the feelings of any shame that arises as you release old emotional wounds and break away from any restraints to unconditional self-love. The sacred rebel within can empower you to love yourself no matter what, simply because you want to. You might decide to declare, I am still lovable, so put that in your pipe and smoke it. This will send an energetic message to whomever shamed you in the first place, whether they've meant to or not. Your message could be going to a parent, school teacher, sibling, friend, lover, or anyone else that was struggling enough with their own shame wound that they couldn't help but dump it on you. You can be free to realize that the shame is just an emotion, not a truth, and you can defy any hold it has ever hold on you and your ability to love yourself. This oracle brings you the guidance that you are now powerful enough to break the cycle. It is time to stop the shame and claim yourself in love instead. What you want to write, sing, dance, or become is you. It is natural. Drop your defenses, get into the grit, and confront the power that any old shaming has had over you. It's finished now. It's time for you to be naked with yourself. Acknowledge how gorgeous you are and get on with your work. Life is urging you to do so because the work wants to happen. What you want to create wants to be created. The word wants to be written. You just need to let go of any remnants of the past that have been in your way. Step firmly over them and onto your path. The healing process. We now choose to forgive and release any person, situation, or circumstance that has ever been a source of shame or shaming for us, whether conscious or unconscious. We now release this from our bodies, minds, and hearts to unconditional love. We choose to claim ourself instead. We love, accept, and claim all of us under the loving protection and wisdom of life. We choose to live as ourselves now. We call on the unconditionally loving assistance that life wishes to send us for this journey now. We honor our creative power and our innate worth. So be it.
Wow. I think that was a pretty perfect card. So is that your checkout?
I'll check out.
So.
What she said.
What she said. Yeah, I'll second that. All right, we're done. No, I mean, I'm doing good. I thought this was really fun. I think the piece that stood out, right, is just like reinforced by, I feel like we touched on it, and then she said it really well in that reading was just like, this is the thing that naturally happens, right? Because this is us. And again, it's that masculine, feminine, like, yes, it will naturally happen, and it requires the structure, right? We have to like set the structure and set the container, right? So Jeremy was like, the structure. We met every Thursday, and we continue to meet, and it's like, and something happens, right? Like the magic happens. So it's like, if you've got the water, but no river banks, then it just, seeps out and doesn't focus. So just like creating the structure to allow, who and what we are just to naturally flow. And it does, right? Like this was fun and easy and breezy, and it's a good time. Like I love getting together and exploring these things. So feeling good and excited to check out my reading from you today and dive into whatever I'm resisting.
If I was to add something like a PS, is that we started this reading, this conversation off with like the queen and the king energy, and I think as I was listening to you check out, I realized like that in some way that's like a manifestation of those energies, where it's like just having the container, us meeting every Saturday, is that kind of king, righteous, like declaration type of energy. And then the queen is almost all the things that are happening in the space, like guided, nurturing, receptive beauty that is really coming through here. And I want, it's not to like define it or confine to that, but as I was listening, I wanted to bring those archetypes back alive and say, like, I really think that's present here, and I see it and I feel it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Totally. Beautiful. All right. You feel complete, Justin?
I'm complete.
All right. Talk to you maybe asynchronously, and if not, I'll see you next Saturday.
Peace.